like-minded people from all around the world at different stages of their guitar building journey. You can join us over on our forum to seek advice or share tips on guitar building processes, materials and tools, or just to share your builds. On YouTube, we have a regular podcast of Guitar Building Chat where you can join the live stream or watch back on past episodes. Our Instagram page shares posts of members' builds and links you direct to their accounts. And for those of you on Facebook, we've got a private group that you can join, share and chat along with. The Guitar Builders Collective is a welcome and open space for all, so do pop by and say hi. Great.
Hello there.
Hi, everyone.
Hey. So I've just seen in the chat, Bill's already said, what's on the menu today? I was just saying off air that we've got a few guests lined up for next month onwards, through to August, actually. So when we have the guests, I guess there's more of an obvious theme. But we were discussing before today just some things that I'd been seeing on YouTube and some people posted on Instagram that I thought were interesting, might be good starting points. So, as always, if you're watching live in the chat, do join in. And if you're watching in the future, leave something in the comments so that we can try and engage with you there. What I've found is the people that are here in the live chat, but there's less comments in the future, even though most of the views, I think, will definitely come from future viewers. So if you're one of those future viewers, say hi.
Yeah.
What I really want to do, because it sort of happened to me partly through this podcast, is I've got back into my pedal addiction. So I've been in my workshop sorting out all my pedals, trying to sell off my old ones on Reverb, but I'm finding that really hard to work out what is a good price, because some of them I can't find anywhere. They seem quite rare, and some of them are quite expensive new, but they're so common on the second-hand market that the prices are low. And some of them are Behringers, and it's almost like, is there any point even selling a Behringer for the amount of money I'm getting for it and the time it takes? But then it takes up space, and I feel like it's a one in, one out policy. So if even if the Behringer goes out for £10, I can justify a £200 pedal coming in.
Of course, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Math.
Well, don't do what I've obviously done. That's thrown out a $240 pedal that I thought was a load of rubbish. It turns out that people like it. So yeah.
So that was a wah. It was a wah, wasn't it?
It was a wah and a fuzz. It was an Ibanez wah and fuzz, and I know Corey found the name of it. It was just a fuzz I didn't like. It just, whenever you put the neck pickup on, you sort of got like a double tone. It was, I don't, very discordant. I mean, it may be a sound that people like now, but you know.
I've never been a fan of fuzz in general, but I'm picky.
Yeah. It's now over.
It took me a long time to love fuzz pedals, and now last probably 5 years, I've really appreciated them. I think I've said before, I've got a fuzz face from probably early 90s that I bought, as a young man, and thought I was going to be Jimi Hendrix just by buying this pedal, and that would be it. And that didn't work for me for many years. But yeah, I really appreciate a fuzz now, though.
Yeah, same here. Like for me, it was always like Billy Corgan's tone on Slammy's Dream. So like that big muff tone with like layered guitars, like that's my fuzz tone. And I ended up building a fuzz pedal, I don't know, maybe it was last year, and I modded it after a big muff. And what I did was I removed the tone stack, because to me, a big muff, it's completely unusable all the way to the left. And it's completely unusable, that tone knob all the way to the right. There's a sweet spot. And I thought if I could just find that sweet spot, I can remove the tone knob completely and just kind of stick it right there, which is what I did. So it's basically like, I think it's like a 2-knob big muff, basically. It sounds great.
Yeah. When I've sort of looked into fuzz pedals and, talking to a few pedal makers, that I sort of know that since they often have or don't have as many components as other pedals, that, by changing one value or one component has quite a significant impact on the sound. So there's, you can make a big difference by changing the value of one component when there's only half a dozen, things going on inside it.
Very true.
I started to really appreciate overdrive, but I grew up as a clueless little metalhead, and it was all metal. Way too much distortion.
Yeah, distortion's the thing. I was listening to some AC/DC yesterday, and I was thinking how, in relation to thinking about the guitar tone and how identifiable certain bands are. And I was listening to the AC/DC, and I was thinking, actually, when you're playing that, a lot of that is playing proper chords, and it's about the rhythm. Well, when I was learning to play, it was all about riffs. So a lot of the Metallica kind of stuff, you're not really playing. You might be playing a power chord, but a lot of it is about getting the riff. And the sounds I was getting then are very different to the sounds that I want to play now, I think. So it's not necessarily just different pedals, it's setting my pedals up in a different way, because I've always been someone that loves the pedals with all the controls on them and then sets it and never touches it, or rarely touches it, until I decide to totally rearrange my pedal board every few months. I don't know what the thing Mark's saying about the tone. Everyone uses things differently. So what's intriguing is seeing how on the internet, and I've just been looking at trying to buy the right bass fuzz that I wanted and the compressor, seeing how the demos are so different. And I find demos are just not very helpful on the internet a lot of the time. But the demos are very different because people are playing such different things on them and using the pedals in different ways. The only demos I like are where someone takes one riff, puts it on a loop, and then they sit there with the loop doing as many different settings as they can. I feel that shows off more of the pedal than someone playing along with a drum track.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I've noticed with demos on pedals is so much depends on the amp that they're using. And it's kind of hard to know how that's going to translate to anything else.
We had Mark from Ferrotone Studios on last year, and one thing he was saying is he'd been looking into what YouTube does when you're playing back your videos and how the compression that you get from the sound varies depending on your kind of bandwidth and what device you're using, or like if you're on your phone, if you're on your computer. So you can't really even have a consistency of what the sound's going to be like if you're watching it across different devices. Now, I didn't really understand what he said, but he's done this research. but basically what he's saying is when you're demoing a sound or something, you can't really get the real feel for it. One of the things you're relying on is the person describing it. And if you've got a person that you watch a lot doing demos and you begin to like them, you begin to know what they like, you can sort of gauge what they think of the sound based on their taste. And if that taste is similar to yours or you understand that taste, it can help explain it.
Often when I watch the pedal or amp demos or whatever, sometimes it's just the mic in the room or the microphone off the phone they're filming off, that it's not the processed digital version. You almost feel like you're in the room with them, and the sound's probably not as well. It's not going to be as good, good, whatever good means, but yeah, you get a feel for what it would be like if you were standing in the room with them, just with the echo of the room and the lower quality sort of recording. So that's what often, they're the ones that I really like. When I find a good video that it sounds good and it's obvious that it's just the microphone on the camera or a microphone in the room somewhere. They're the ones that kind of tell me that, I like a sound of a pedal, if I'm listening to two or three to make a decision about one I want to buy.
Well, something I've noticed is a lot of them, you got to listen to their dry tone that they start with, because a lot of them are, kind of muddy and gross to start with. And I feel like it's going to ruin everything and you're not going to get a real taste of what that thing sounds like. But
one thing I liked, Mike from CGS used to review guitars and import guitars from sort of fakes from China and things like that. And he always demoed them through his Pod Mini. And he said that was a kind of reducing factor that if anything sounds good through that, or if that's always consistent, that setup, then you know what you're hearing is the differences in the guitars, not the difference in the amp or the effects and things like that.
I mean, it is a problem, isn't it? Sorry, it's a problem because you've got a real. The signal chain, as you say, that comes through. You mentioned the compression. I notice, especially on speaking, that YouTube really does compress a lot of the sound on it. So, yeah. Are you hearing exactly what they're hearing? Probably not.
Just to share this, I can't remember who shared this the other day. I'll find out in a minute. With the Guitar Builders Collective, but I don't know if you've seen this advert. I think the sound's going to share.
No sound. Not for me, anyway.
Did it not sound come through?
Nope.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
The shame.
Also, share tab audio is clicked, so I don't know where that is, but never mind. Oh, there we go. I'll do it one more time.
Yeah.
For finishing your pedal board for the 38th time. The satisfaction of finishing your pedal board for the 38th time.
Yep.
All right, now I've now confused myself with the sharing. I quite enjoyed that.
Yeah, I gotta take out of that too.
Hey, so look, this is what I was hoping one of you might know a bit about, or someone in the chat. Just before we came on air, Scott was mentioning a pedal that he liked or wanted to try out, which was the Friedman pedal. What's it called? What was it called? The Brown?
The BE OD. And the BE was for Brown Eye because it was supposed to be a pedal incarnation of the Brown Eye amp.
So I've recently noticed that a company called Demon FX have made a copy of it, which looks like they haven't in any way tried to hide away from the fact that it looks exactly the same. And they've done that with quite a few pedals, mainly like expensive pedals, so some dark glass pedals, the Cali 76, which is one that I wanted to get for my bass, and they've got a cheap version of it. And I just wondered if these rip-offs are quite close to the originals. Are they using the same circuits and components, or is it not the components? You know, they've got different components, cheaper components, or is it that just totally different circuit and they're trying to disguise it? I wonder if any of you had experienced comparing the two.
I've never compared the two, but these schematics are like known schematics. You could download them and you can follow them, and it's, you know, get whatever components you want and populate your board. So it's super easy to clone any pedal out there. Plus, all these pedals are basically derivatives of other pedals. So it's like it's almost the same pedal over and over and over again. So yeah, I can imagine them sounding almost identical because really it's all voltage.
So then my question here is, what do you think about buying the cheap version when they've kind of ripped off the design? Maybe they've ripped off the original schematic from that person if they put it all together. Is that like buying a cheap copy of an artist's work, like buying a fake Gibson? Or is it something that's okay to do because they're literally a quarter of the price?
I wouldn't feel bad about it personally, but you know, I've been looking at a lot of things like Tube Screamer. To get an original would be difficult, and there are a billion clones. The OCD, I mean, a lot of those that are really well-known pedals have tons of clones, and the cheap ones seem to be maybe not exact copies, but pretty close. So I don't know. I personally wouldn't have a problem with it, but I don't. You may think getting the original, you know, it has some super secret ninja sauce to it that, you know, the clones don't, or I don't know. The prestige,
Actually,
$250 for a pedal. I don't know.
I've got a couple here because I know we were sort of talking about pedals and things, and since Scott mentioned the tube screamer, so this is one that I bought a very long time ago, second-hand shop. So it was the Ibanez Sound Tank series. So it's cheap plastic. They had issues with the switches and things. It was one of my favourite pedals to use, but the switch was just totally unreliable to use at all. Over the years, I then found other sort of copies. I had this one, the Visual Sound Double Trouble, which is based on the TS-808, I think, and just two stacked together.
Wow.
This one felt, and this was probably the pedal that I used for most of my sort of gigging time, that you could have, one as a boost, one as a heavier distortion, and then, stick them both on for heavier still. And this one's got, bass boost for each channel. And this one kind of always felt like it was a bit more distortion sort of based. Then at another stage, I know Behringer's been mentioned, the old Behringer pedals. These two sound very similar. And then because I always wanted one of the Ibanez TS9s, last year actually bought. So this is a brand new one from last year, and Ibanez Sound Tank, Ibanez Tube Screamer, probably I don't know what would it be, 30 or 40 years difference between the two, and they sound pretty much the same, to my ear. So they've obviously tweak things over time, but if I had either of those two on my pedal board and I was sort of playing it and not looking at what was there, I wouldn't know which one was which.
Nice collection of tube screamers, Aaron.
Yeah,
thank you. I've got a few. It's all the Overdrive. I had one of these classic ones as well, and I think really early on they were the two, because I do like stacking. Those two lived together on the board for a long time. But yeah, it's that tube screamer sound that I've sort of, I know when we were sort of talking about this stream as well, we talked about tone chasing and things, and that's what I've sort of, been doing. That I got one of my first amps as a serious amps was a Fender Twin, but the 80s version with the red knob sort of version. So that's the amp that I've still got, and over the years I've just gone through different versions of tube screamers just because that's the sound that I love, and I've enjoyed all of them for different reasons, whether it's a cheap one, a cheap nasty one from a second-hand shop, or whether it's a fancy one. But yeah, on the Behringer pedals, I think I saw a thing from Corey that they're cheap plastic. Even the pins on the side, how you open and get the battery on are terrible, but they sound amazing. Like, if I was going to build a pedal board of cheap pedals that you could take to gigs and it wouldn't matter if beer was splashed all over them, I think I've got 3 or 4, and they all sound really good to me. And I think, as Mark was saying, it's the same schematic, same version of components, different case, different color.
I think a lot of the tube screamer connoisseurs chase after those original ones because of the specific IC chip that they use. And I believe throughout the years, there's been 3 different IC chips, but the one that people chase after is the one from the original. I don't remember the name or the code of the IC chip, but that seems to be the one that people think has the magic.
Yeah.
And really, it's just an IC chip.
Yep.
I mean, that's one of the things I remember about the original clones, is they're encased in something that means when you take the back off, you can't really see what the components are. They were hidden. So for years, it was a bit more of a mystery. And that was partly my question. If it's not necessarily the components that are different, especially if you're buying one where it visually looks exactly the same, are you buying a rip-off? So if someone was to build any of your guitars and sell it cheaper, what would you like? And they use slightly different materials, but it looked the same. I think you'd feel a bit pissed off. So I don't really know. I would anyway. Well, actually, that's not true. I did see someone who copied one of my guitars, and what I felt was quite nice that someone had decided to copy something I'd made because they liked it, and how interesting it was that it had been made so badly. And that was a little bit worrying. But it didn't have my logo on it or anything. But someone contacted me and said, "I've just seen this in a pawn shop. Is it one of yours?" So that's why.
Yeah.
But
Daniel, Daniel, there's a huge industry of clone pedals. Like clearly it's happening right now. Like, and no one seems to be complaining about it. And there's a huge industry of like build your own clones too. Like it's just gigantic.
Yeah.
But when a company's selling one that looks identical, and it's like the look, like the one I've just ordered is a dark glass super symmetry ripoff, and it's just called the super symmetry, and it's exactly the same casing look, everything's the same. I didn't mind buying the cheaper one because I can't afford the more expensive one. But I was thinking in the back of my mind, am I stealing, like literally stealing from somewhere else, like getting copied, downloaded music illegally, like we used to do in the 90s? You're all like, no, Dan, you're thinking don't worry about these moral things.
Can you? Is there like intellectual property on the way something looks? Like, can you trademark a look? Because I mean, clearly Behringer isn't getting cease and desist letters. Like,
no,
they're selling millions of pedals.
Oh,
Gibson tried suing loads of people. Sorry, Scott, I'll leave it to you.
Looking at those close-up, I'm sorry. That green is identical. Like when I'm looking at that you know, they've got, that's the same color palette. There's no difference between the green on those two pedals.
A tube screamer has to be green. I mean, any clone screamer has to be green. I didn't have a problem, you know, downloading MP3s. I don't know.
No, I didn't either. But then I realized, I think once I got to the point where I was doing a job and earned money and thought about it a bit more, I thought actually it's probably better to pay for it. And then by that point, MP3s were fully available through Spotify and things like that, so it wasn't quite the same anymore.
I don't know if Lars Ulrich was living under a bridge and, you know, eating sandwiches out of a trash can. I might have felt bad about it,
but my thing is, where do you draw the line between someone that's under a bridge, someone that owns the bridge, and then there's somewhere in between where you think, oh, that's all right to copy that person's or steal that person's music, but that person, no, it's not. There's got to be a line somewhere. And I think they're just the same. Just because they're rich doesn't mean... especially as actually the rich ones, like Metallica, I prefer their music often to the cheap ones. So they're doing something, they're working hard at something that I like. Should I be stealing it?
I suppose maybe for guitars, like all of the cease and desist stuff is just what it looks like. It's the shape. It's all those iconic things. Whereas a pedal, you know, the purpose of the pedal is for the sound. Apart, you know, when you're not looking at it, and that's the circuitry. It's, you know, electronic components that are soldered up together. So maybe that's a harder thing to say. I own the copyright for soldering these 3 or 4 resistors together in a series, you know, or parallel in a circuit board. And like, how can one person say that I own that combination of things and, you know, someone else doesn't maybe?
I think you're right, Aaron. I think that's what it is. And that's specifically why the original Klon was gooped in that black resin epoxy, because you couldn't really claim that as intellectual property.
I think...
Sorry.
I kind of feel like in the case of something like pedals, it's more if you have obviously gone out of your way to try to make it look like the original. So, you know, somebody could mistakenly want the original and pick up your, you know, cheaper version. That's sketchy ground, I feel like. But talking about pedals blurs the lines quite a bit because it is so open-ended and, you know, anybody can copy those circuits.
See, I feel like there is a divide. A few years ago, I bought loads of really cheap pedals. I think none of them was more than £30 to make a pedal board with. And some of them I used, some of them I got rid of and bought some others to replace them. But in the end, with that range of £30 pedals, I got a pedal board that, for my guitar, in my setup, for me playing at home, I thought sounded fantastic. And that made me think, budget pedals, why would you buy a more expensive boutique pedal when you can just buy a budget pedal? But then for me, a lot of the boutique pedals, the ones at £250, £300, they often are doing more interesting things. So maybe they are just combining 2 circuits or adding an extra knob here, but often they've thought about why they're doing it and they're adding something to that original circuit thing. So in a way, I feel like they've come up with an idea that's really good, but it doesn't take very long before that idea is then copied again, back down to the cheap things. And I feel like if I was a rich man, I would invest in the people that were coming up with those ideas more than the cheaper ones, maybe. But, you know, capitalism, I'm not in that position. And then sort of back to that thing about the copying. So I think a lot of Behringers are just straight copies of Boss pedals. But I often buy the Behringer pedal as a test of what I want to do. And I had, for example, a Behringer Super Octaver pedal. And on my bass, it just didn't track very well. But I knew from just experimenting with it, that's what I wanted for my bass sound. So I ended up buying an MXR, what are they called? Yeah, pedal. That was much more expensive and worked really well. Essentially, it's the same thing, but there's definitely a noticeable difference in how it works on the bass. Maybe for a guitar, it would have been fine, the Behringer one. So Behringers were always for me a test out thing. And the two pedals I've just bought are replacements essentially for Behringer pedals. My Behringer compressor, which basically does the job for the bass, is great, but I wanted to get a better one. But what I've done is bought a cheap knockoff of the better one, which hopefully will sound the same. And then I mentioned before my love of a particular range that TC Electronic made of pedals, and it was their enclosures that I really liked the look of. But it turns out they have basically used the Behringer circuits and put them into better looking enclosures. So there's this potential chance I'm upgrading from a Behringer to a TC Electronic, but actually it's the same thing, just in a nicer case.
I was going to say earlier, Behringer could do a lot by just repackaging those pedals into something that doesn't look like shit. But somebody else already discovered that and put it into play, I guess.
Yeah, good for them.
I mean, Behringer do that as well with their synthesizers. As far as I know, they're not as cheap as their pedals, but they're still cheaper than the expensive synthesizers. But they probably are just as good. But there definitely is, and I want to bring it back to guitar building. There definitely is an aspect where the quality of the materials you're using makes a difference in certain situations. So yeah, if you're gigging a lot, Arran, your tube screamer that you had originally, the button goes on it or whatever.
Yeah.
If you're playing your guitar a lot or you're playing your synth a lot, if it's got nice buttons to touch, it's going to be better. And that was the thing with those TC Electronics versus the Behringer ones. They just felt much nicer components or like things to hold. So I don't know. I don't know what I think about buying the knockoffs when they look clearly exactly the same, because that means the company's literally set up to take something that exists, that is popular, and make a clone of it that in all ways and make their money out of that. So there's no original thought in there at all.
You know, Daniel, you'll have to show us an example of that, because I'm kind of curious how close of a copy it is, right? The looks we're talking about. But getting back to like the schematic, like when it comes to like analog circuitry, I was thinking about like delay pedals, in particular analog delay pedals with like the bucket brigade chip. That chip can only be wired one way. So it doesn't matter how many companies are making analog delays. That chip can only be wired. Now it doesn't matter how many tone stacks you put on it or what you do at the back end. The bucket brigade chip can only be wired one way. So it's really just a derivative schematic that every company uses. And I don't feel bad about buying a cheap analog delay versus buying expensive one. Where you start seeing some really like intellectual property concerns is in DSP, where you have companies like Strymon where there's really nothing analog happening. It's all DSP, and their algorithms probably can be protected through intellectual property. And those are really, really hard to copy.
Yeah.
Well, software is a little easier to obfuscate. I mean, it can still be decompiled, but it's a lot harder to copy that. I would think. And I could be totally wrong. As a programmer for 30 years, I could still be wrong.
Right, I'm going to share so you can see the copies. I mean, it may just be this one company. Lots of other ones, they'll change the name a bit. But what I found funny about this was how they haven't changed the name.
Well, I kind of like the fact that clones they'll name something that it sounds vaguely reminiscent. You can kind of tell. You can kind of tell from the funny name what it's a clone of. That's cool, but yeah.
I'll show you an example of that in a minute, Scott. I've got another one here I can share.
No way, that's a clone.
That and look, they've changed the name, the Freedman.
Oh, Freedman, yeah. I mean, that's a bit of a rip-off, isn't it?
But this company are literally. So I first came across this company with a pedal that I'm currently selling on eBay, which is it's a tube screamer with a little switch on it which changes between two types of tube screamers. But this is almost identical. Here's the original Dark Glass Super Symmetry, and here's the Demon FX Super Symmetry.
Right. Okay, but we are talking about AliExpress here, so these are like third-party Chinese factories trying these out, and you basically can't do a single thing at this point, right? Like,
no, exactly. I mean, I appreciate it. Literally is a Chinese factory where you expect them to be like this.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. You found all the clones, Daniel.
This one's 199. This one's 74. Although actually you can get these cheaper than that. And it's not just on AliExpress you can buy them. Other shops legitimate shops are selling, and maybe they're not really selling the new ones anyway. They're selling the old Demon FX ones. The new ones where they are obviously visual copies are harder to get in this country. So talking about that Chinese copy, one thing I'm also interested in that I watch a lot on YouTube is Warhammer and painting miniatures. And I saw this incredible thing about in the way YouTubers with guitars will show you the little things you can buy on AliExpress or wherever, like the different capos or picks or strange little things that might improve your playing. Often the Warhammer painters will do reviews of different things you can get to paint with. And one of them is a device for cleaning your brushes. And it's just simply a reservoir of water. You put your brush in one end and it triggers the water to rush down so you can wash it in a little sink and then it drains away. Really simple design. Anyway, somebody designed that, took out a patent on it for the EU, and then AliExpress just copied it and started selling it. And then a British company bought them on bulk from wherever it is, China or wherever it is that they get them built, brought them over to the UK and took a UK patent out on it and has banned the original person that sells them in Europe from selling them in the UK because they don't have the UK patent on it. And things like that I find absolutely horrendous as a concept. As a company that can do that, even though the YouTubers are out there outing them, people still get it from this other company in the UK because it's the cheap place to get it from.
No, that's not right, is it? No.
How do I sleep at night? To be fair, I don't care about most of this. I was just thinking it might make an interesting conversation.
No, it's certainly something to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not cool.
No. Yeah.
How do you get AliExpress junk in bulk and then patent that? That seems odd.
I think they probably aren't getting in bulk. They're probably going to the company that build it. So from what I vaguely remember, there are Chinese companies that you can access through. Maybe it's not AliExpress, maybe it's something else like that. Because my brother used to do this to make your things for you. So my brother has a company that sells beard products, and originally all his brushes and things were made in China, and some of his bottles and things like that were made there and shipped over. But now I think he's got a UK supplier that builds them, makes them. It's more expensive, but it's much easier than arranging all of the shipping and the taxes and stuff like that. But yeah, so you just put your call out, and loads of these different companies said we can make you these brushes, sent him samples, and then he picked the one they wanted. sent him his logo, and that was it.
Just slightly changing the subject here, I wonder if any of you guys have considered throwing your guitars design out to one of those companies and mass producing one of your favourite guitars. I mean, Scott, yours, the lap dancer, for example.
Doesn't seem to be that popular with most people. So,
well, that's definitely what some smaller companies do. I know that I'm at the moment respraying one of my bass guitars that I've had for years. It's one of my favourites. I've taken it apart, and I was thinking that when I bought it, it's by a company called DePinto. And when I bought it 15 years ago, I'd never heard of them. It was just on eBay, and I bought it secondhand. But since then, Chris DePinto, someone I follow on Instagram, I find his Instagram page so interesting because he doesn't just talk about his guitar designs, which I really like. His shop sells lots of other things, and he refurbishes other things, and he does repair work. So he's often talking about interesting repair jobs he's doing on guitars, keyboards, and synthesizers, anything that his music shop can sell. But I didn't know anything about him originally, and now I do. Following his page, at one point in his career, all his guitars, the bodies and necks were made outsourced somewhere else and then sent to him. And then he would individually do the fret job on every guitar, set up every guitar, double check all the electronics on every guitar. So everything was checked by hand by him for him then to sell on. So there was a factory making en masse. And I would imagine for a small company like him, we're not talking thousands of guitars, we're talking tens of guitars, but making them, sending them to him. But now I think he has a certain place that makes the bodies in the America and a certain place that does the spray work, and then he does the assembly.
So he outsources all the fun stuff and does the shit jobs.
Yeah. But it's all his design, but maybe he's the person that just likes the design, the designing process.
And are they sold as sort of high-end guitars? Sorry, are they sold as high-end guitars? Are they?
Yeah, what are the prices on those, Daniel? Like, how is he making money?
I was trying to look online at what they were selling for because I was intrigued by the one I've got, which isn't a model you can buy anymore. And from what I could find for that model through places like Reverb that have their sold items and things like that, they tended to go for about $900, $800 or $900, the guitars.
Right.
So potentially, I don't know what they were new. There might be a scope for that. But one thing I've noticed recently on all his posts is he, well, at least the ones he posts about are quite custom orders. So the guitar will come in, but someone might want a certain type of pickup in it, and he makes interesting pickups as well. So he'll make a new pick guard for it, or they might want a really unique finish. So he'll go to his finisher and it'll get sort of glitter sprayed on it. Very, very cool. Look, but yeah, that idea of getting them made abroad, Dave, I think that is a thing. In fact, one of the boutique builders that I've met at SC Guitars, he hand makes everything, and they're very complicated what he builds. But he took his basic body design and he was working with someone else, so they could just make them en masse, the basic body design, and use that as a sort of budget version that he could sell as a model as opposed to the individual guitars he makes. I'm not explaining that very well, but then he'd just have a cut. So it's his design, he does the sort of finishing, but there's someone else who's got the CNC machinery or whatever it is to copy the body multiple times.
Yeah.
I often wonder how these guitar builders are making any profits, especially if you're outsourcing, unless you are doing this in mass with like huge volumes. Because I looked into outsourcing like painting, and it's several $100s. That eats into your profit margin.
Yes.
And so like if you basically as guitar builders, like to make any money, we have to sell past the $2,000 range. Anything less than it just you're not making any money. So I often wonder if you're outsourcing everything, like how are you making any money?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So Chris, who makes these, is someone that I want to get on. He's on my list of people to contact because I find his Instagram so interesting. So maybe it's something we can ask him.
Yeah.
Are the buttons on those, are they the pickup switches?
Yeah.
Is that, yeah, okay.
He's got an interesting setup on one of his guitars where there's a little speaker on it. I might be getting it wrong. It's a speaker and effects pedal, but there's an external little patch cable that you can literally physically plug things in and out that are built into the guitar instead of a switch. It's a cable, and I quite like that as a sort of weird visual, mad scientist type of guitar. Hey, we've gone off track a bit because one thing I want to talk about when we talk about pedals and things, and I appreciate Mark's not here all the time, but this might be something that Mark can get involved with, is this idea of trying to share again. I recently found a page a YouTube channel even that was dedicated to Nirvana and Nirvana instrument guitars and things like that, but he had videos that were all about how to get the Nirvana sound and what pedals he used, and that made me think about this idea of why people chase the tone of a particular artist they like. So in my head I can understand why people want to sound like Eddie Van Halen, but why other guitarists who aren't necessarily known as guitarists?
That's a good question, Daniel.
That does seem weird. I can't imagine why you'd want to chase the Nirvana tone.
I mean, I absolutely love Nirvana. I always have, but
yeah, I'm being a dick. Now, the local radio station here, I swear every third or fourth song has to be Chili Peppers, Nirvana, or Pearl Jam, and I've gotten to where I just absolutely loathe all three. It's not really their fault. I used to like them, and the station just ruined them for me. But Nirvana is not one that you really, as a guitarist, think about. I don't know, personally wouldn't think about, the specific tone. However, recently I've started listening to a lot of things looking for what are they using there? Is that compressed a little bit? And there's a little bit of a chorus happening there.
That's definitely an interesting thing I find about a channel like this, is it makes you more aware of what guitarists are doing to get certain sounds.
Yeah.
And why they're doing it. And like in this video I watched about the Sans amp, it actually gave a history of Sans amp and how their pedals worked as well. So it's quite informative beyond just Nirvana itself.
Well, there are a lot of effects that are kind of weird. And if you're listening to it all on its own, you're thinking, where the hell would I ever use that? But then you find out where it has been used lightly and you go, oh, okay, I'm starting to see,
Yep.
Yeah. Do any of you guys watch Jim Lill's videos where he tries to get the sort of tone? He's a country player, but he tries to get the tone of some of his heroes, as it were. But it is absolutely fascinating how he strips it right down to the absolute minimum. So I mean, does the wood make a difference? Do the mics make a difference? Do the speakers, do the amps make a difference? And his videos have absolutely blown it all out of the water, to be perfectly honest with you. But it is fascinating, this whole essence of tone. And of course, the real problem is it's all about the tone of the guitar is the tone of the recording, and the recording depended on the room the amp was in, the miking, the whole load of stuff. It's not just, he put it through that pedal.
True. I was going to say, Dave, that makes sense, because I was under the impression that Kurt Cobain's tone came from the producer. I think that's what I have read. That it was like whoever produced the album. I don't remember who produced. Never mind. Was it Steve Albini? I don't know. But I was under the impression that it was the producer that came up with the tone, not Kurt.
I saw a great interview with Rick Beato and Butch Vig about recording Nevermind. I'm sure it was, and they used to trick Kurt into playing songs multiple times so that they could record them through different amps, because he just liked to play it once and that was it, or twice if he had to. But they apparently Butch Vig would say, "Oh, sorry, I pressed the wrong button, it's not recording," and they'd do it again. So then you're absolutely right. Butch Vig would really heavily mix. So sometimes you'd be listening to 3 different amps mixed so subtly that you can't necessarily notice that it's 3 recordings.
That's,
Or
you know,
it changes at different points in the song.
when it comes to recording, I mean, you could do literally anything, you know.
But that's what we're hearing, Scott. Like, it's not like we're not in Kurt's bedroom hearing him play. We're listening to the album. So the tone is the album. The tone came from the producer.
Yep. Yep.
And maybe for Nirvana, you know, when you're watching their live stuff, it possibly sounds different every time they play live. Like sometimes, you know, it might sound really heavy and distorted, and other times not so much. So, you know, possibly that's the other difference.
Just think
the
about
tone of
Just think about the times they could layer tracks on top of each other.
Yeah.
I mean, the recording could have, you know, 8 guitars effectively.
That's the tone, yeah.
One thing this guy did is they had photos of Kurt and videos at different gigs and photos of his pedal boards at different gigs. And you could see which pedals in the videos he was pressing at which time. So there's just like this huge analysis that's out there on what is used and in which songs and how they're used. And it seems that for almost all his time, he had the same Boss. What's it called? It's an overdrive. I can't remember which Boss overdrive it is. And then he bought that Sans amp in around in Neutro. But that was basically all he had, plus the amps, of course. What I found interesting, speaking to, I don't know if you know a band called Skindred, but Mikey from Skindred was saying that when you play a venue, at least in the UK, the bigger venues are much smaller than the venues you have in America. But you bring your own PA system along. So you may be using some of the house speakers, but a lot of it is stuff you bring along yourself, and the interface is something you bring along yourself. So you've got a bit more control over what's happening in the venue. Because I always found that some bands that I like a lot just sound terrible in certain venues and better in other venues. And I always just assumed it was because of the system that was there. But maybe it's just to do with the shape of the room and who happens to be around that day. But I think they always use the same sound guys.
Mm. You know, I hated Nirvana when they first came out. I was so jaded. I was playing in hardcore bands in the late 80s, never got any traction. Playing in punk bands in the early 80s, no traction. And then I guess in the 90s, I was in a death metal band, and I was really happy there. And then Nirvana hit, and suddenly punk blew up, and we were just so jaded, like, oh, man, like, I hate Kurt. And then it was like Guitar Heroes, right? In the 90s, early 90s, we didn't have any Guitar Heroes because of Kurt Cobain. Like, you know, we had John Petrucci maybe, but the shredding went out of style basically because of Kurt. And so like there was a while where I really just wasn't into punk, but then I got back into it and I love Nirvana now.
A little aside, just on the news tonight here, I think it was Apple Music who just said like their top 10 albums of all time, and they had a panel of experts, whoever that is, and Nevermind was voted from them as number 9 for best albums ever list. It was a weird list. I think was it Lauryn Hill or someone was number 1 album. It was a bizarre top 10. Weird. Yeah, it was really bizarre.
Anybody's top 10 list or top anything list of music is always so incredibly wrong.
This one was super weird.
I've got some friends that I used to live near, so we used to see each other at least once a week at a local pub quiz and at least one other night a week at the pub. And now we live in different parts of the country, so we meet up once a month online, and we started doing like an album group, equivalent of a book group. So we just listen to an album a few times. We have to listen to it 3 times, and then we'll meet, we'll have a chat about it. And it's just really interesting how what criteria people use to make their decisions about what's good or bad. It reminds me, Scott, of when you did one of the Great Guitar Build-Off, one of your videos of how you ranked people when we had to vote and you had your scoring system. It's a bit like we all have different scoring systems for ranking what we like. And when someone's saying this is the top 10, I want to see their working. Why is it the top 10? What are you looking at that makes it a good album?
You know, I hadn't thought about it, but GGBO really kind of put a spotlight on that. That if there isn't direction in how to judge things, people can use the weirdest concepts to go off of. Watching, oh God, who was it? When they had specific judges, you know, God, I can't even remember who any of them were. But there were a lot of people questioning how they came up with their decision. Man, who was it?
That was the year. What I remember was Tamir from
Well, yeah,
from
it was on at one time.
3x3 Customs.
4x4 Customs. Yeah.
4x4 Customs was there,
Sorry.
and I just remember her being a judge.
That was the first official year, wasn't it? When they had the top, whoever.
And everyone had so much
Crimson picked the top 10, and then they had other people choose from the top
Brad
10.
Ango was there.
Yeah,
But I'm thinking, like, I think it was the second year that there were several people, and I can't remember who it was. He wound up having to do a second video and just kind of totally redid the judging because people gave him so much grief over it. Who was it? Let's go to
So it's like I give my friends grief when we do this album group because they're all ranking their albums, and I'm often ranking things 5 or lower out of 10, and they're like, but surely it's good because this is good, that, and whatever the reasons it is that it's a good album, I rank it on, did I enjoy listening to it? Would I listen to it again? And 9 out of 10 times, I'm probably never going to listen to it again, and I didn't really enjoy listening to it the first time.
All right, well, but music's a little bit different. All right, so just personally, and nobody take offense and get all booty hurt and fry me, but I don't like the Beatles. I never have. But I can appreciate the contribution, and I see why they're a big thing, you know, to a lot of people. I just personally don't enjoy listening to them. So I would have to take all of that into account if I was trying to judge, you know, a bunch of old albums on, you know, because undoubtedly a very huge contribution to music. I just don't enjoy listening to them.
No, but so, I mean that's the thing about music, isn't it? It's so subjective, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was watching a guy who came up, a chap called One Man and His Songs, and he does stuff with synthesizers and stuff, and he was playing his top 5 albums, and they're things that on Spotify have got really low hits, so that hardly anybody listens to them. And one of the bands was called Osric Tentacles. I don't know if you ever heard of them. Anyway, so he played the track, and actually I really liked the track. Yeah, and then he played a few other albums. You know, King Crimson is another band. I really struggle with listening to that music because it's so discordant, and it's probably technically really good, but no, it doesn't fit me at all. You know. Yeah. And just going back to the guitar competition, the GGBO, that's what I felt was missing. Like you say, I mean, looking at guitars is very subjective as well. Do you like the shape of the guitar? Don't you? But if you'd have said, right, okay, technically, let's pick out 5 sort of technical points that you should judge a guitar on, i.e., you know, are the frets right, whatever, is the neck straight, that sort of stuff, and then applied a little bit of subjectivity over the top of that, then I think you would have got perhaps a more consistent view across the judges.
Yeah. As is, I think personality and video quality and all kinds of things got taken into account in some cases and not in others. And it was Big D. His judging video, everybody shit all over it, and he actually did a second one. It was Big D.
He was I think he was the most thorough out of anyone, though, wasn't he? For his reasons why and being objective, maybe. Yeah.
Well, it was open-ended. I mean, realistically, feel free to judge them based on whatever the hell you want. So, I mean, I felt bad for him because he put all that work into actually judging this, and then he just got beat up. But judging music is very subjective. I mean, there's only, one real constant in the universe, and that's that Iron Maiden's the best band ever, past, present, and future. Other than that, it's all very, very subjective.
Yeah. I often think like people see like music as a competition, like who's better than the other one. But I kind of think, well, sports are competition. You've got two sports teams playing against each other. One of them's going to win, one of them's going to lose. You've got two bands playing in your local town one night after the other. Just go and see both of them. Like, it's not, you know what I mean? It's not like a one or the other. It's just listen to both, listen to all of them, listen to one night and another one another night. That you might have a preference that you listen to one more than the other, but it's not like you can only listen to one at the exclusion of everything else.
Yeah.
I started watching yesterday the Punk Rock MBA on YouTube, who I love. He does 10 to half an hour episodes on the history of bands, and it's really informative, really in depth. Doesn't ever play the band songs for copyright reasons, but absolutely brilliant. But he was doing a live stream, and it's the first one I'd seen of his, where he has a tier system. So he's doing his top 10 guitarists, but I didn't follow through to the end. So I'm not sure if it is, this is the best, this is the worst. It's how he ranks them in tiers, and the tiers are based on who he would have at his barbecue. So it's based on their ability to play, but he's not basing it on their personalities and their political opinions. And that kind of ruined it for me, because I really try my best these days to not find out political, unless the band's quite political anyway, the political stance of a lot of bands I like, and what they do in their spare time, because sometimes that ruins the music for me. And actually it ruined his channel a bit for me, the way he was quite judgy of certain people's views. I would have rather not heard that.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Like, he seemed quite dismissive of Tom Morello because of Tom Morello's views, but Tom Morello's playing was not that important in the conversation of it, and it was about top 10 guitarists, so I got a bit confused by that, but there you go.
See, and that doesn't make a lot of sense, because Tom Morello's playing is fairly insignificant.
Yeah.
I mean, can we just not just play a normal solo, for the love of God, Tom Morello?
Well, I can hum some of his odd noise solos though, so that's for me that's a sign of a good solo.
Odd noise.
Yeah, but that might be because I can't hum in tune, so that's why I can't hum some of the other.
Us that had a discussion about overrated guitarists. Because personally, Tom Morello was in that list for me, and the Edge. You name yourself the Edge, and you do one thing through an entire career. Yeah, off everybody today. Let's talk about tellies.
Hey, talking about that, I know Mark's got to leave, but should we talk about Tonewood when he's gone?
I'm going to miss the discussion on Tonewood. Yeah, please do that.
I'm just
catch it later.
I'm just gonna.
Is there a discussion though? Let's be honest.
No, I just wanted to share. There was a video just put up with Paul Reed Smith at one of his events. I think he goes around music shops talking about guitars and things, but he started out talking about Tonewood. Now, unfortunately, the conversation didn't go very far about Tonewood. It wasn't that interesting, although it was interesting when he was talking about wood used on fingerboards. But I started to dislike Paul Reed Smith a lot in this, but then I realized he was playing a bit of a character in his way he was doing the sort of, I guess, in a shop, he probably does the same speech or talk or presentation almost every time. So it's a bit repetitive, but occasionally he'd slip into what felt like a more normal person, and it was really interesting, But there you go.
I saw a little bit of that, Daniel. Two things. One, Paul Reed Smith is financially invested in Tonewood, right?
Yeah, right.
Two, the amount of logical fallacies in his discussion was just incredible.
Yeah.
So I definitely recommend people watch that. And also, Dave mentioned Jim Lill. Watch all Jim Lill's videos. Watch them all, because Jim Lill's cool. He doesn't tell you there's no such thing as Tonewood. He just shows you the data, and then you make your own decision. Yeah. Simple as that. Now, the last thing I want to mention before I have to go is that I got a bunch of guitars here, right? They all sound different. Why? I don't know. I don't want to know. If I pick one up, they all sound different. So Jim Lil, Tonewood, all guitars, no matter what, sound different. Who cares? Have fun. Build guitars. I gotta go.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mark. Take care.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will forever fall back to the episode of Dylan Talks Tone where he screwed a bridge to a picket fence to demonstrate that it sounded just like a Strat with Strat pickups.
Yeah.
I'll play Paul Reed Smith in the background with the sound off. So we've got something else to look at. And just without the sound off, you might see why I didn't like him that much. I think you've got to be a certain type of person to be able to call women darling and doll, or whatever he's calling her, darling, I think it was. I find it just a bit rude to call someone that when you don't know them. But anyway, what was interesting is at one point in it, he was asked a question and he started to answer it. And the person that asked the question said, last time you were here, I asked this question and you said something different. And he said, that's because I've definitely changed my opinion on it since last time. I thought more about it, changed my opinion more. And it was about the effect that the wood has on a fingerboard to the sound. And he was saying that basically, if you think about it, and I don't know why he hadn't thought about this before, but if you think about it, when you play an open note, the string is only on the nut and the bridge. So the fingerboard would have no effect on it. So what you can do is sort of test to see the sound difference by playing a note somewhere else on the fretboard. And
If
therefore,
you're the same material.
But then you're touching the fret. You're not you're like the fret wire, not the fingerboard itself, really. So is that really making any difference? I don't really agree with him there. But yeah, he was. It was interesting. He was talking about the fact that originally the choice of wood for fingerboards was about the ones that wouldn't wear so much or absorb sweat so much. And when Fender started using mahogany, they realised they had to varnish it to sort of protect it because otherwise it would just get really bad. Touching the string to the wood on the fretboard behind the fret, so that goes into the whole tone wood idea. Is that now causing the fingerboard to vibrate? Whereas when it's touching the nut's touching the fingerboard anyway. So is that not causing it to vibrate? I don't know.
No.
Personally,
I think there's so many. Sorry, Scott. I just think so many other factors. I mean, if you're talking about electric guitars, which I presume we are really now, you know, the position of the pickups is so important. You know, the windings on the pickups have an effect on it, and the electronics you're playing it through has an effect, and all of those are a much greater effect than any tone from the wood. I mean, the only way to test the tone wood, presumably, is to unplug the guitar and play it without any electrics, and then just hear like you would an acoustic guitar, where the tone wood does have an impact, obviously, because it's the vibration of the wood.
Exactly. He kept saying, like, would you go to a violin maker and not trust his opinion on tone wood? I said, but he's a violin maker, not an electric guitar maker.
Mm-hmm. One thing I've tried to think about is, how much effect all these things have, and I've kind of tried to simplify it in my own head, but and sort of thinking that it's going to be obviously the player, whoever's the skill of the player is probably the biggest impact on the sound, but then it's kind of like the tone wood, the fret, the body has the least impact. The string vibrating to the pickup has an increased impact on what the sound's like. Once it goes through the electronics into the effects pedals, that'll increase the impact. That'll be a greater impact. And then the amp and the final sound and processing is going to have an even greater impact on the sound. I've kind of tried to think like that. Does it start off, with the wood and the guitar, the smallest influence on the sound, and then the further that sound travels through the vibrations and electronics, the further it goes away from the player playing it, is that having a greater or noticeable difference? And that's, just they're my random thoughts that I have every now and then, just to kind of organize in my head, the difference of all these kind of things that we think about.
Sure.
I saw a great video the other day of someone had clearly put it up to try and get clicks. It's very clickbaity, but it was talking about sorry, I've forgotten the name of this. Phil from something Studios, Spectre, not Spectre Studios. It's not Phil for Spectre. I'm getting people with my mind's going
that one
here.
Phil Spectre.
It is Spectre Studios though, isn't it? With the mad guy with the big hair who shouts a lot. Someone's going to say in the comments what it is. Anyway, I've seen loads of his videos where he talks about tone not being. I'm going to try and find out who he is. Glyn Fricker, that's it. He talks about pickups not being relevant for your tone if you're playing things that are like really distorted heavy metal, because as soon as you have lots of high gain coming through, like really high gain distortion stuff, the effect of the pickup is very minimal. So I've seen him do lots of examples with different pickups that as soon as you put them through this high gain distortion, the distortion sound is all modeled from the distortion itself as opposed to the pickups. And I found that really interesting. So this person that made the video that was sort of clickbait was trying to say the truth about Glyn Fricker. And this guy started off by talking about how tone is in the hands and how he'd seen people play live on instruments that the roadies beforehand had played, and it sounded different when the actual guitarist was playing it. But then he began to say how his mind had changed over the years, and how he agreed with everything that Glyn Fricker said. But Glenn's definitely talking about his audience, which are heavy metal guitar players.
Yeah. Just interesting point there that you brought up, and that is how the player plays the guitar, how you use the pick on the guitar. You know, like Brian May with his coin, or metal pick, whatever it is. Or, it's that does definitely change the tone. There's no doubt about that. But probably lost in the mix once you've done a lot of overdrive on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Was it? I can't remember who it was that I saw do this now. It might even have been Paul Reed Smith in his video. But when you're playing the guitar, like when you're playing by the bridge, totally different tone to it. If you're strumming, picking at the bridge, totally different tones if you're picking here, and demonstrating that, and then demonstrating it through pickups with effects on. And the differences start to be less and less depending on the sort of level of distortion you're having. So it's harder to tell. And that was a really clear example of it. Maybe that was Glyn that did that.
I've heard, reminds me of, what's his name, the Leyland Sklar, the American bass player with the big beard and the long white hair. I sort of follow him a little bit, what he does. And he was saying in the studio, he's got one of his guitars. He's got a switch on it that does absolutely nothing.
Yes,
and when the engineer says to him, "Oh, look, it's not sounding quite right. Can you just change something on it?" And that's what he says. He flicks his switch that does nothing, and then he changes his finger position a bit closer to the bridge or a bit further away. And the engineer's like, "Hey, that sounds great. Yeah, keep that on or whatever." So it's that exact thing. It's just that. The position and those things. So it's really interesting.
Reminds me of a college professor I had. It's a graphic designer, a really high level dude that all his students went to big companies in Chicago, and he would have you start something. So you pitch this first idea. And the project was like an album, a whole marketing thing. So album cover and everything. And whatever your first idea was, he would tell you it was shit and go off and try something different. And then he'd crap all over your next idea. And eventually you'd wind up coming back to your first idea and you'd bring that back to him and he'd go, "Oh, it's brilliant. I love it." If you wanted me to just think more about it, just tell me that.
Yeah. No.
You said, I have happily, through 30 guitar builds, ignored the pickup position problem.
Yeah.
I was happy to hear somebody say, I mean, you know, as soon as you fret it, the harmonics move anyway. So, and I was happy to go, yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to go with that because I don't have to think about it.
Now, there's a book that I know Daniel's got and I've got it, Martin Oakham's book, where he's got a whole section on this. And his diagrams indicate that when you fret something, that's the book. I've just been using it out in the workshop. When you fret it, the harmonics are still roughly in the same place. So the pickup positions are pretty much the same, which I thought was wrong, and it may be wrong, but his diagram, and I haven't got it in front of me, it definitely shows a fretted string, and the harmonics are they've squashed up a bit, but they've all squashed up sort of fairly equally, and so the pickup positions are pretty much in the same place. But
interesting.
I mean, I've noticed from guitars where you fiddle around just moving a pickup over the top of the strings, you can definitely hear the difference. I mean, there is a big difference between the tones, and also the cancellation out between the two pickups, the bridge and the neck. If they're in a slightly different position, you get a different cancellation.
How in the hell with a build could you decide where to put them? Just build the whole guitar, get it strung up, and then
just hold the pickups over the top.
Yeah, I made a jig. I made a jig where you could place your pickups in the ring of the plexi, and it had feet, so you could stand it up, you know, upside down on your guitar, just so I could test wiring and pickups and everything without installing them.
That's really clever. Really clever.
Yeah, you can move it around and stuff, but we build the entire guitar and then test your pickups and then go back and route
them all.
Scott, did you make a video with that jig in?
I don't know if I did or not. It's been in a few videos, but yeah. I mean, it once I thought of it, I thought, well, that's just common sense. But I guess it was a little bit of an intuitive leap to get there. But it just hit me one day that because I would put together like a little cardboard type of thing where I could get my controls in roughly the right placement, so you could do your wire up without I don't think I've ever done a wire up inside the cavity because my God, why would you? So I would set up a little cardboard thing with the controls so you could get them wired up, but then it was just a next step to think, what if I hook the pickups up in this thing, and then you turn it upside down on any guitar just to see if your wiring was working right. I might try to do something like that for lunch break, because I've been planning on trying to do something for lunch break for a while.
Yeah, I was about to say, if I can dig it out of one of your videos, I'll cut it out and put it in. But if you want to do something with it, that'd be brilliant.
I don't know that I did an actual real feature on the thing, but I should do something about that. I got notified by YouTube the other day that since I haven't had any actual activity on my channel for months, that I'm in danger of being demonetized. So
really?
Oh no! Get back on there again.
Content again, finally.
I bought this one here because this guitar here has got two humbuckers hidden underneath the top there, and little adjusters here, so I can slide the pickups back and forth, which is a great idea, except there's one problem with that, and that is the pickups are so far away from the strings that you lose any effect really of the different positioning. It sort of it almost picks up the string from a wider area, so you don't really get you slightly sharper at this end by the bridge, but it doesn't make that much difference. And I mean, there is a chap who makes the guitars with a pickup on a rail that I forget what they're called now, but it looks funny because you've got all the wiring and everything hanging out the top and everything. But
There's a guitar, the Gibson Grabber, which was a bass guitar that my brother used to have one years ago, and that's got the sliding pickup, single pickup bass guitar, and it's sort of built into the pick guards from memory.
Right.
So you don't, like, all the wiring's underneath the pick guard still, so you don't see any mechanical kind of things. But yeah, so exactly the same idea. You just slide the pickup where you want it. So that's there's obviously. Oh, and you've obviously done something similar, Dave. So I'm sure that there must be other people who've tried that as well.
There's a company who's one of my favorite companies on Instagram for interesting looking guitars called Brute Bass Guitars, and they have a number of their different guitars and basses where the pickup slides. It's a single pickup, and there's just basically a cutout under the guitar, under the strings, that seems to be with a plate on it with a pickup attached that just seems to move backwards and forwards. I think that's how it's working. I'm not really sure. Maybe the plate is fixed and it's just the pickup that slides in somehow, moves. And there's another company that do it with magnets, I think.
My rule of thumb is if you want that sort of smooth tone from the neck pickup, get it as close as you can to about the 24th fret, and that sounds nice. That's what I head for. And the bridge, the bridge is going to be sharp, so yeah, bug it by the bridge. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I always just went by, put the bridge fairly close to the bridge, and the neck as close to the end of the fretboard as possible. Hope for the best.
I always used to just go for what looks nice as well.
Yeah.
All right, so one of the things that always bothered me about the Strat, partly because you've got a flat body and a tune-o-matic, since it's not a tune-o-matic, you don't have that much clearance between the fret, between the strings and the body, and that middle pickup is always right where I want to pick.
Yeah,
just seems
absolutely
to be in the way. So a 2 pickup guitar that didn't have that middle one was always nicer for me to play, because that middle pickup was always in the way.
Yeah, it's me red Strat. and you're absolutely right. That middle pickup is always in the way. I actually this was from eBay. It had a bent neck, and I managed to get that straight, but it was a story. But I put Tone Rider pickups in. I took out the single coils, but I've actually messed around with the knobs here. So what was this tone knob actually now switches this between a single coil and a humbucker. So I get that sort of single coil sound. But you're right, that middle pickup always in the way.
Yeah, it always hit it.
Are you using that middle pickup, or have you just put the Tone Rider 2 humbuckers in and you're not using the middle one?
No, I am using the middle one. So yeah, on the selector there, I've got it. Yeah, so I've got that selects the middle one. It does all the usual stuff. It's just that this one I can have as a single coil. That's a single coil, obviously. I always leave that one as the humbucker.
Yeah,
because but it's sometimes nice to have that as a single coil. It's just that sort of gentler sound somehow. But yeah.
Totally off topic.
Nice guitars though.
Totally off topic. The other thing I noticed about a Strat was I tend to hit the volume knob and it slowly rolls off, and I don't realize it until I start thinking, what the hell's going wrong? And then I realize I've slowly knocked it back to, no volume.
There's something about a Strat though. It's a lovely guitar for sitting and playing. I find, because the neck's in the right position somehow. It's sort of pulled back a bit, whereas a sort of Les Paul style is not quite as comfortable when you're sitting. But just talking about Strats, that guitar you flashed up then, Daniel, one of your relic guitars.
Yeah.
It's actually quite amazing, that guitar.
Oh, thank you.
You have to show us.
People are always surprised that it just plays like a normal
Look at
Strat.
it.
Actually, even hangs quite like a normal one when you're playing it.
Wow.
But this. Oh no, not this one. I've got a relic one as opposed to a bent one like this. It's got tone riders in it. Really like the tone rider pickups.
Yeah, I like them. Mine's very sharp. They've got a nice sharp, crisp tone to them. Definitely.
This has been hung on the wall, and before that in a case for 6 months, and it's still in tune. So there's something right about the setup. One other thing I was going to mention today was I saw I'll play it with this. Did that sound come through?
No.
Never mind. It was Josh Scott from JHS saying, "Oh, is that how you're meant to use it? I'm a broken man," because he's apparently been using EBOs wrong for 30 years or however long he's been using them. Literally holding it the wrong way round on the guitar strings. So I'm not really that familiar with EBOs, so I'm not sure if I would do it wrong or not. But it got me to thinking, how many things am I doing wrong that I don't know about? There's probably loads of them. Like I'm certain when I'm using my chisels, it's wrong. But as Mick's just said, does it matter if you're getting the sound out? The problem Josh was having is when he realised he was doing it wrong and was shown how to do it, suddenly it sounded much better, and he was implying that if he'd known that all along, he might have used them more and been more experimental with them and done better things than he had done.
Because you don't know what you don't know, do you? That's the problem.
Right. So something like guitar building, there are a lot of times where you run across this thought of, why is it done this way? You know, I don't think you think about the number of times that you do something just because that's the way it's done.
Yeah.
Right. This comes down to me fret leveling, if I can say it, and my idea not to bother fret leveling, but to string the thing up, play it, see where the buzzes are, and just deal with the buzzes. That's what I did with the bass, and I think I'm going to do that again with the next one, because it certainly was easier to do that.
I know Ty doesn't level his frets because if you've got your fretboard nice and flat and you're putting your frets in properly, all the frets should be the right height, right?
Yeah. In theory,
Should be. It takes for me about 2 sticks of wire, and it's possible that there's a difference between those 2 sticks. I mean, it's possible. I don't know to what tolerance those things are really, produced. I put them in with a hammer, which isn't exactly helpful. So in theory, if everything seats correctly, but I mean, you could have a dent in, one from hammers. I just know when I go and do a level, I see a lot of variation in where the wear is. So maybe it comes down to how careful you are about installing. I don't know. I don't trust me, but
a couple I've done, I haven't leveled them, and just ones that I knew were for me and that were just going to knock around the house or weren't didn't matter too much, and it was a bit of out of interest just to see what it would be like, and there was a bit of buzz on a few spots, and probably and I don't even know if I've lost track of some guitars you go back and you fix a few things. So I've lost track of what I've actually gone back and re-leveled or what I haven't. But a few that I've done. There's a few buzzy spots normally up on the higher end, but a lot of the times I haven't kind of noticed too much.
I think Mark was talking about the same because it's just an extra step, really.
Yeah,
and it's a step I don't enjoy. So if I can kind of get to that, and I kind of try to take care in getting the radius right and checking the frets when I obviously use the hammer as well, and I really check each one and make sure that there's no gap, and if there is, I'll go back and give it a bit more of a tap. So I kind of try to take that extra bit of time banging them in just to avoid having to do a lot of leveling because
I think it's worth to have a go at it because there's a tendency when you're leveling it, you put the marks on and you start rubbing away with your flat thing, and I always end up taking too much off, because there's always one there that a stubborn one that's got to go, and it's not, the pen has not moved on it, so it must be lower than all the others. So you're rubbing away. So the rest of it is all flattened down, and then you've got this one fret that's beautiful, So I think, well, what's the point of that? Fix that one fret that's too low, That's my thought. It certainly worked for this the bass that I did. I mean, that's fine. It's probably one of the best ones that I've ever done.
Right.
Low fret would be kind of hard to deal with, but
that's it. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I've had 2 or 3 guitars where you start to level, and I'm like, it barely needed anything. But that's been less common for me than.
So last one I did, and I'm going to do it on the 2 I'm working on now. I just put the frets in and then went over them with a fret rocker to check, to see if there are any issues, and then dealt with those small issues, and that worked fine. And I imagine if you're doing that and you see a low fret, I'd just take it out and replace the fret probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's because, like you, I don't like leveling. Well, I don't like is crowning.
If you think about it, realistically, where there is a problem on the fret, it's only a problem, on one side.
Yeah.
So in theory, my mind was, okay, if the thing isn't completely 100% flat all the way across, then it's not right. But I mean, realistically, you only got half of, well, not even half. You only have one side of that string to worry about. So. And there's probably a certain level of tolerance before it actually becomes a buzz, or a buzz that's bad enough that it's noticeable or worrisome,
Yeah.
So I don't know. The perfectionist in this probably, goes a little further than necessary. But
well, I really want to do it like that because I haven't done it yet, but I want to try what Ty does. I've seen other people do, where you round the fret edges using a Dremel with a little a cut-off wheel, or like a thick wheel with a little groove in it, so you can round off the edges of the fret before you put it on.
Yeah,
and they look really cool. So
they do.
I mean, obviously you can still level when you do that, but doing that first and getting it so perfect seems quite fun. So I wouldn't mind trying that.
I don't know. The less time I can spend on frets, the better.
Yeah.
Generally been my attitude.
Sometimes I think as well, if I've got them in and there's like a few buzzy spots, and you think, oh, it's not too bad. Often I think, well, I could actually level it all and re-crown and then put more buzz back in, and it could end up worse than it was initially. Yeah. So they're the thoughts I have as well. It's like, oh, am I going to go through this whole process and then hasn't changed much or makes it worse?
Right. So who has tried a fret level and you're horrified at the results of how this is going to go, and oh my God, I'm going to wind up with no fret at this, and then realize that you didn't take tension out of the truss rod before you started. Because actually, luckily, pretty quickly you realize I'm wearing the shit out of both ends and nothing in the middle. What could possibly be causing that?
Phil has got a good point there. When you do a proper fret level, it helps get rid of any issues you might have when you're playing that maybe are harder to notice if you're doing what I do with just the fret rocker. So that if you're playing and you're bending or doing anything like that, maybe there's a slight raised bit when it's more of an angle of the string you wouldn't notice.
Oh, but if you put the strings on and test it, you see, you can see that.
Yeah.
The other thing is after about, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks or so, if I've left a guitar and come back to it, it's just different anyway. Especially a new guitar. And you find that buzz has magically disappeared somehow, or you've got a new buzz, probably the more the common thing, appeared, So I don't know. It's all down to movement, isn't it, in the neck? And
I know I've had a few where I did a level, I just didn't go very far, and wound up having to go back and redo it because there were some buzzy spots. So I know there's been a time or two I did a fret level that I didn't go far enough. All right, so and the last project that I've had on my bench for a damn year. God, I've had so much trouble fretting the damn thing. But shit, I totally forgot what I was going to say.
We could leave that as a cliffhanger, and we could start next session with Scott.
Tune in next week to find out what the hell Scott was talking about.
Or write in the comments, what could he have been doing? What's putting
What's on Scott's mind?
Yeah, just doing the setup for the comment reminded me of this, overwhelming tornado of problems I'm dealing with on this thing.
Oh dear.
That fretboard is the most beautiful piece of wood I've ever seen in my life, and it has been a nightmare. Oh my God. I've got fret slots that aren't deep enough. It seems. I've decided I'm gonna have to pull all the damn frets out. And the first one I pulled, it jacked up both sides of the slot completely, and I wound up having to just put some super glue in there and try to mash everything back down and hope for the best, because I'm just gonna have to. I got 12 frets on there, not all of them seated correctly. I'm just gonna have to pull them all, repolish this whole damn board, and then the worst thing in the world you could ever have to do: deepen slots once you've already got
bindings on. Yeah. Oh dear.
Maybe you should do the first 12 frets and have the rest fretless.
Yeah, maybe. Except I don't think that's what he wants.
Do you glue them in? Do you glue your frets in?
No.
Right.
Early on, I used to do a little bit of super glue on the tang, but realistically, with wood, it should grab well enough that I shouldn't get. But I know there's at least one of those slots that has opened up enough that it's gonna need something to hold.
Yeah.
And that seems to me to be the mark of something that is not good enough. But one of the things that's freaked me out about this build is this dude's planning on taking it to another luthier for the wire up, and another guy in town, and whatever I produce to send over to him, I want it to be absolutely 1,000% perfect. And it's never going to be.
No, of course it will.
Yeah.
So look,
somehow I got to get past this project so I can move on to another one.
Oh yeah, that's the worst thing, isn't it? Yeah. When you've got something that's stopping you.
Yeah.
So just for anyone that's here at the moment who's thinking of joining us next week, we're doing it on Thursday again, but different time, because we're going to try a shift for the last Thursday of every month to be a bit better for people in the Southern Hemisphere. So it's going to be 8 o'clock AEST. Is that right?
That would be it. Yep. Eastern Standard
like
Time.
that. Yeah. Yep. So, or is it ADST?
No, that's daylight savings as well. We put the D in, so
you save your daylight at a different time to us.
Yeah.
So that's just 2 hours earlier. So that's 11 o'clock, 11 a.m. where I am, and 5 a.m. in where Scott is. CD. I'm going to call it CDT. I don't know what it's called.
4 a.m.
4 a.m.
4 a.m.
Yeah.
There we go.
Lately, it's not uncommon for me to be up at that hour, but it's about the time that I would fall down.
Yeah.
That's not a good habit. So,
yeah. Well, so we'll see how it goes during that for the next few months, and that might make it easier as well for certain guests to come on at that time as well. Great. Well, let's say goodbye.
Good.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye.
See you.
Thanks again.
And, see you again soon. Bye.
later.
The Guitar Builders Collective is a group of like-minded people from all around the world at different stages of their guitar building journey. You can join us over on our forum to seek advice or share tips on guitar building processes, materials and tools, or just to share your builds. On YouTube, we have a regular podcast of guitar building chat where you can join the live stream or watch back on past episodes. Our Instagram page shares posts of members' builds and links you direct to their accounts. And for those of you on Facebook, we've got a private group that you can join, share and chat along with. The Guitar Builders Collective is a welcome and open space for all, so do pop by and say hi.